Hi, Shiva Asma from Fancy Comma here, and I'm here to ask you a question about science communication. Two questions, actually. The first one is, if you're a scientist or have studied science at any levels, K through 12, which we all study science there, undergraduate, graduate school, did you take any science communication courses, and what did those courses look like for you? And my second question is, if you have ideas to teach science communication at those levels, what do you think should be taught at those levels? So when I was in undergrad at MIT, I was part of this committee, this faculty committee that had room for two students, and it was me and this other guy, and it was called the Subcommittee on the Communications Requirement, because back in the day, MIT was just adding a communications requirement, and it included communications courses like writing and speaking courses, both within your major, which we called that CIMs, communication intensive within your major, and also CIHs, which were communicative intensive in the humanities, because I don't know if you know this about MIT. There's a couple of things that are kind of weird about it. Because you take so much science courses, you take a year of math, a year of chemistry, a year of physics. At the end of your degree, even if you major in English, which you can major in English at MIT, you get a bachelor's of science. The other thing about MIT is that most of the humanities majors are grouped into what's called HAS, Humanities, Arts, and Social Sciences. And so there's at MIT, all the courses are numbered. So course 21 was like humanities, and that included the different languages. Like I minored in Spanish literature, so that was 21F. I was 21F minor, and 21F was course 21. Humanities F was, I believe, for foreign languages and literatures. My other major, my main major was, first it was course 10, which was chemical engineering, and then it became course 9, which is brain and cognitive sciences. So within all of the different courses or majors, we had to take both these CIM classes and the CIH classes. And when I was at MIT, we, as part of the subcommittee on this communications requirement, we were working on ways to be able to make sure that students were in fact able to learn actual communication skills in these courses, because it's one thing to create a course to teach people how to read and write, it's another to be able to evaluate them. So a lot of the work that I did as a student on this committee was chatting about ways to evaluate the courses, which there was a formal evaluation program. As far as teaching the courses themselves, they had a number of requirements, but the professors themselves came up with the courses. The CIM courses, the communication intensive courses in our major, which we had to take a few of them, I feel like, based on my experience, I think that's a wonderful model to have in the science, to train people in the sciences and also in engineering about communicating effectively. And so the way that worked, like in practice, was, for example, I took a class called 702. Course 7 is biology, and it was biology lab, and it had an add-on course. It was just a couple of credits, a couple of units. I don't know. MIT has a very bizarre course credit system, but it had like just an add-on module that was for some amount of course credits, and it was called 702 SC, and obviously 702 SC stands for Science Communication. So not to bog you down in the details of MIT's course numbering system, but to explain what exactly this course taught you, it was an add-on. So, because in science labs, you do a lot of writing. Like you're constantly writing in your lab notebook, and then once you do your experiments, you write up your experiments, which I have lots of memories of writing up my lab reports, so sleep deprived. What science student doesn't have memories of writing their lab reports sleep deprived with like 9 million other assignments happening? But one really good thing about 702 SC was that we were able to have like directed training on ways to summarize, like to communicate science. Like one of the first things we did in our course in 702 SC, and I want to say this was back in 2003 or so, we read a paper about the Framingham Heart Study, which was this study. It was about heart function in a bunch of people that lived in Framingham, Massachusetts, because MIT is in Massachusetts. So we read this study. I want to say it was in the New England Journal of Medicine, and we talked about the Framingham Heart Study. And the New England Journal of Medicine is a very good journal. It's one of the premier journals in the medical field. And so we are one of our assignments in that course was to summarize the abstract in layman's terms. And actually, I found that assignment really easy because I always loved writing. When I was in high school, I did a thesis project on the poet E.E. Cummings and published it in an academic journal. So even though I really wanted to do science, I also had this like love of writing. So I found that class really easy, and I learned a lot from it. And as I went into graduate school, I kept thinking back to that course where I learned about summarizing scientific abstracts, being able to skim papers and like get the main point just from looking over it really quickly, being able to identify and write about science masterfully to become someone that can command the English language both in writing and speaking. And we had to take, I want to say we had to take 2 CIM courses, and then obviously in the humanities, most of those were communication intensive courses. So we just had to make sure we had 2 of these courses where we had like a focus on oral and written communication. And I really think that the model that I worked on when I was a student at MIT and that was established at MIT is a really good model of science communication training. And I don't know too much about science communication training outside of MIT because I have only taken courses in science and taught courses at MIT. I haven't taught a course at MIT. I've taught high school students at MIT, but I taught a course at Georgetown when I went to grad school for neuroscience, and I was teaching about anxiety and fear processing and PTSD, which is my research topic, or one of my research topics. And we did actually have at Georgetown in the interdisciplinary program in neuroscience, we actually also did have specific communications training. We had one person that was a communications trainer, especially for spoken oral presentations. She came and gave us a talk about how to communicate properly. We also had an add-on course about ethics in our program. We did have like workshops where we would critique each other's grant proposals, or we would review each other's grant proposals and provide feedback. But in graduate school, I don't remember that we had any structured science communication training. I think it would be amazing if, for example, in graduate school, there was a add-on course similar to 702 SC about how to write grants that actually get funding, because most people that read your grants are not specialists in your field. So it actually helps you to be able to communicate science, because then if the person probably will understand your grant better because they are not an expert in your field. I'm actually working on developing a science communication add-on curriculum that is based on the Fancy Comma blog. So people can, every week, I envision people can read 1 or 2 blogs and then do an exercise, and I'm going to make this available for free on the Fancy Comma blog. I have also taught science communication lectures and workshops, and I have lectured to the Association for Science Communicators. I recently started tutoring one-on-one science writing to high school and college students, and I've learned a lot about what kind of mental blocks people have when they get into science writing, because a lot of times people are really good at science and they really like science, but they don't consider themselves writers. And that's something I noticed among my classmates at MIT. Some of the writer's block can come from a fear of failure, or a fear like one's ideas aren't good enough, which kind of come from the way science is set up, where the people that are really well established are more likely to just kind of like diss everyone, and the people at the bottom are less able to get their ideas accepted. So there's a lot more to science communication than just teaching people how to communicate properly. There's also the imposter syndrome involved in not communicating effectively. And I think that the imposter syndrome can actually make it hard for scientists, especially marginalized scientists, to speak up. Women in science, sometimes as a woman in science, or even people that are lower on the totem pole of science, their words don't count for as much. So teaching science communication education, teaching science communication in high school, college, and graduate school is something that I'm really interested in, and I'm trying to make this happen by developing this curriculum. I'm really interested to hear about if you've been learning science communication in your undergraduate programs, like what did that look like for you? I know there are a number of schools that actually you can get a degree in science communication or science writing, and MIT is one of those. You can get a science journalism degree, but at MIT, the science journalism department and the science departments are not connected at all. Like I didn't even know there was a science journalism program there until recently when I attended a night school of journalism event. What are your thoughts on science communication education? Have you taught science communication education? What are the challenges you've seen and experienced? Feel free to reach out. Go to fancycomma.com and get in touch if you'd like to be interviewed about science communication, your experiences teaching uh, scientists, because one of the most pressing challenges that we have in the 21st century is tackling all of these scientific issues related to climate, um, infectious disease. There's so many different challenges, semiconductors, advanced chip manufacturing, and we have to the science has to flow out of the ivory tower and out of industry and, be able to inform lawmakers, the judicial system, different parts of government, local governments, state governments, everything. So the only way we can do that is by helping everyone be on the same page with science. So really interested in your thoughts on this, and make sure to follow us on all our socials and our blog and newsletter for more on our curriculum and other efforts that we might be doing in this space.